In this video, we're going to be looking at control statements in Python. So there are three control statements in any programming language, which are break statement, continue statement, and pass statement. So control statements in any programming language are used to control the flow of the program, as the name suggests. Each of the control statements has its own way of controlling the flow of the program. And of course, we'll be seeing examples for each of the control statements in Python. So we're in the Jupyter Notebook, and we'll be starting with the break statement. And as the name suggests, the break statement breaks the current loop which is executing, so control of the program jumps directly outside the loop. And we can use the break statement inside any for, if, or while loop. So let's see an example of a break statement inside of a while loop. So let's initialize I to 1, and while I is less than or equal to 10, print I. And I'm going to add an if condition here. If I is equal to 5, break. And then I'm also going to increment I here by 1. So let's see what this gives us. As you can see, it gives us numbers from 1 to 5. So in this while loop, or in this piece of code, we're basically printing numbers from 1 to 5. I want to stop when the value of I reaches 5, and for this purpose, I'm including a break statement inside of an if loop. So what's essentially happening here is that initially the value of I is 1. When I enters the while loop, the condition is true and it prints out I. And then it goes on to check if I is equal to 5, which it's not, so it doesn't execute the break statement, and executes this part, which is the incrementing of the I part. So I gets incremented to 2, condition stays true, prints out I, if condition is false, so it doesn't break, continues, and this goes on until I becomes equal to 5. The condition, the while loop still remains true, so it still prints out 5 to the screen, but then when it enters the if loop, or the if statement, the condition becomes true, so the break statement is used. Or basically, the loop is terminated, and I no longer gets incremented, and the while loop also stops. Here's another example. This example is just to show you that the break statement terminates the current loop, but it doesn't terminate the outside or the outer loop. This piece of code prints out all the numbers from 0 to 9, except 5, and that is because we have put a break statement in the if block, which checks if the iteration variable is 5, and accordingly breaks the loop. Now here, what is happening is that the inner for loop is terminated when the iteration variable is 5. But the outer loop still continues, and so we get all the numbers after 5 printed out to the screen also. Let's move on to the continue statement now. The continue statement is used to skip the rest of the code after the continue statement. The difference between continue and the break statement is that the continue statement doesn't terminate the loop. Instead, it just moves on to the next iteration. Again, the continue statement is also written inside the for, if, and while loop, as we'll see in an example. So I'm going to say for I in range, let's say 10, if I is equal to 5, continue, and print I. In this piece of code, we have a for loop which contains an if statement which checks the value of I for 5. And if the value of I is 5, then it tells Python to continue to the next iteration. So if we see in our output, we can see that numbers from 0 to 9 are printed again, except 5. 5 is not printed out here. And that is just because the continue statement, which was introduced in the code. So over here, if we had used the break statement, it would have terminated the loop completely, and it would have only printed out the numbers from 0 to 4. But when we use the continue statement, it just skips the current iteration, but it does complete the rest of the for loop, which it's supposed to. So when we have continue over here, it just wouldn't print out 5, but the rest of the iterations after 5 would be printed. Now let's move on to the last statement, which is the pass statement. And this is the statement which essentially does nothing. Like really, the pass statement is used just as a placeholder, so nothing happens when the compiler encounters a pass statement. For example, if I say for I in range, something like 10, pass, nothing would happen, but then it wouldn't give me an error either. But when I just execute only this part without any statements in the for loop, it would definitely give me an error. So the pass statement is used as a placeholder. But then you might be wondering, why on earth would this be used then? I mean, it does nothing, right? Well, if we want to write a piece of code later, but we want to declare a function, or we want to declare a for loop or any other loop, then and there, the pass statement comes handy. For example, I might want to write this for loop after some time, but I need to remember to write it right. So that's why I'm going to use the pass statement. Well, in this video, we took a look at 3 statements, 3 control statements. The break statement first, which is used to terminate the current loop. Then we took a look at the continue statement, which is used to pass the current iteration, but then continues the rest of the iterations of the for or the other or the any other loops which it is executing. And then we took a look at the pass statement, which is the third one, which does essentially nothing and acts as a placeholder. There's lots of things you can do with control statements, and you can also refer the Python docs if you want to. They'll give you more an insight on the control statements. So that's it for this video, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.